Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Akron's hottest and fastest growing show, 3 to go. I'm your host, Hank Forrester, coming to you live from Stakeout Studios overlooking the rolling plains of Hardesty Park. Today we get to meet the folks from CASA, but before we do that, let's have a big round of applause once again for Lindy.
How you doing, Hank?
I'm just living the dream.
So today's episode is brought to us by Stray Dog Food Cart, making Akron more Acrony since 2009. The carts have hit the street, so make sure you look for them around town. You can stop by their flagship location located underneath the main Akron Library, or you can head out to the Northside Marketplace as well. And it was so much fun hanging out there last Sunday, for sure. We also are doing the show from Acme Fresh Markets. Beaker and Journal voters have elected Acme as having the best deals in town with the best pharmacy and the best checkout, and I can agree. So stop in today as their 2-day celebration sale continues for hot prices on many items you may need.
Yeah, we stopped in this morning. Folks, we're doing this a little bit of a different format. You can see I am not. Wait, hold on. It's worth watching today's episode just to see Candy dancing. All right, well, there's that. That's how we're starting this thing out. So that's perfect. All right. Point being, a little different type of format today. I'm being lazy because I ran Rubber City Reviews earlier, so I'm off camera today. I'm going to let the ladies run the show for us today. But I did stop into Acme this morning. I got some ribs, and I got some milk, and I got something. There was a bunch of stuff, and it was all like cheap, and it's a 2-day sale they're running right now because of the awards it just won. But guys, today's also brought to us by one of our main sponsors, Cycling Solutions. If you're in need of bike repairs, bike adjustments, special fittings, initial bike setup, or coaching and counseling, Cycling Solutions can help you with that. You can see their placard right in front there. The number is 330-338-4307. Get a hold of Tom. His expertise and process is second to none in the Akron area. So I encourage all of you to reach out to him either through Facebook or online at www.cyclingsolutions.net. And in addition, today is also brought to us by Nick's Landscaping. They are out and about. They are busy right now. If you haven't contacted them yet, you may be in trouble, all right? They're located conveniently on the border between Norton and Copley. Nick's been taking care of yards for over 20 years, and no project is too big or small. They got the easiest phone number in Akron to remember. Let me scroll down, and that is 666-7000. 330-666-7000 for Nick and all your landscaping needs. All right, so folks, first off, thanks for tuning in earlier to Rubber City Reviews. Right now, Rubber City Reviews got in trouble. So we used some music that we may or may not have been allowed to use. And right now our video is under quarantine. So we're trying to get the video unlocked. So there's that. All right. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. The guys were great. And I did capture that audio. So we'll at least get that up. But yeah, so they broke down Avengers and that was fantastic. But today we're here at 3 to go. We get to sit down and chat with the folks from CASA, C-A-S-A, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. Okay, this kind of ties in. If you're following our show, we've done previous shows on the opiate crisis and on our adoption and foster care show as well. This kind of ties in with that. It's like the next part of that. So thanks for tuning in. Let's have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, out there in Akron, Canton, and Cleveland area for Beth and Candy. Beth and Candy are here live with us today. So thank you, ladies, for being here. Okay. So I always start out, and Lindy's on cam today. And before we go any further, let me just pan over. It's Lindy's birthday week, or actually birthday month, right? I mean, most women celebrate birthday month. Okay, so she's got her little cake. Okay, she's got some Acme Fresh Market cake right there. So make sure everybody wishes Lindy a happy birthday. Okay, for the whole week.
Gifts and dinners all month long.
And she's accepted gifts, dinners, and hugs all month. All right.
That goes a long way.
So thanks for that. So Lindy's going to kind of run tonight's episode, and I'm going to shut up. Right. I'm going to try and be quieter than I normally am. So she's going to kind of run tonight's episode. So we're giving Lindy a shot to be the face tonight because she is I'm not much to look at. All right. So here we go, Lindy. Away you go. And we always start, ladies, let's start by telling us your Akron story.
Okay, so this is Beth Cardina speaking, and I've actually been living here in Akron for 30 years now. I actually live in the Hardesty Park area. My husband grew up in Castle Park, and after we were married, we lived on Harcourt, and now we live right down the street on Brighton. So I've been living here for about 30 years and working in the area for 31.
Awesome.
It's Candy, and I actually live in Macedonia, but I work in Akron. And today is actually my 21-year anniversary working for CASA.
Awesome.
So yeah,
That's awesome.
She deserves her own cake.
Okay, we can. We'll order that. We'll get that going. So just so you know, Macedonia is still the 330, and we have a lot of loyal listeners that actually tune in. One of our previous co-hosts, who's now got his own podcast, that's Roddy. He runs the Swingin' a Tribe, which is an Indians podcast. He worked in Macedonia, and they recognized him. Like he was out delivering on a route, and they said, "Hey, aren't you that guy from?" So we know that 3 Throw to Go is watched in Macedonia.
Right.
All right. So, all right, I'll be quiet.
All right, so we talked about CASA is court-appointed special advocates. So tell us a little bit about what is CASA, and then how kind of did it get started?
So again, it's an acronym for Court-Appointed Special Advocates, and these are actually community-trained volunteers who serve as guardian ad litems for abused and neglected kids. And actually, the CASA program here in Summit County has been around since 1981. Most people aren't familiar with CASA, but we are here today to let everyone know what the good work our volunteers do, and also hopefully to solicit some more volunteers. And really what their role is to advocate for the best interest of abused and neglected children who have been identified through Summit County Children's Services.
Okay, so it sounds to me like this is similar to like fostering and adopting, or kind of helping to take care of those kids that are in the court system while they're kind of transitioning through different situations or different stages of life.
well, they act. Our volunteers act as that child's advocate in court.
Okay.
So they investigate the case, monitor the case, and then they make recommendations to the court of what they think is in that child's best interest. So they'll make recommendations about visitation, about placement, about any kind of services they think the kids may need or that the parents may need.
So this is kind of like a third party who kind of can look at both sides of the situation and say, you know, looking at it from this perspective, I really think this is best for the child, and speaking, giving them a voice essentially.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah. They do an independent investigation aside from Children's Services. That we're our own separate unit.
Awesome. So if and this is something that I've never even heard of. So I lived in Akron since about 2013, and I have a huge heart for kids, and like, you know, like raising up the next generation and like loving on other people's children. And so especially, you know, having a little bit of personal history with having some issues in my own family, you know, that's really exciting to know that like I, as a person who lives in the community, can become an advocate. So if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to become an advocate, tell me how I would go about doing that and some of the things that I would need to be trained on.
Well, you can visit our website, which is www.summitcasagal.org. And you can find lots of information on there. And part of the process is you have to be 21 years of age. There's actually an application online that you can download and you can send into our office. Once you do that, you meet with our pre-service trainer who will do an interview process. It's more of a conversation than an interview. And then once that's completed, there is about a 30-hour training curriculum that the CASA volunteers must attend. And that covers everything from child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, mental health issues, substance abuse issues. So it serves as a really good foundation for our CASA volunteers. Once they attend the training, they're actually sworn in by Judge Teodosio, and they become an officer of the court. And once they are sworn in, they actually are assigned a volunteer coordinator, and Candy is our lead volunteer coordinator. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to her so that she can inform everybody on what the next stage looks like from there.
Right. So then after they graduate, they get a volunteer coordinator, like Beth said, and then we help them throughout the whole process of the case because I remember what it was like going through, and it is it's something new, it's something unfamiliar, and we help them with any kind of case management questions that they have. Help point them in the right direction of like, who do I contact first? Contacting social workers, parents, teachers, counselors, like everybody who touches that child's life, you want to talk to as that volunteer so that you get a big picture about what's going on with that child's life and then what you can recommend to make it better.
Okay, and then so it kind of sounds like this is there's a lot that goes into this, and it's too much to. You'd have to pay so many people in order to be able to fully have this, and to fully fund it would be really expensive. So obviously that's why they have the people to volunteer. It kind of takes some of that stress off of having to provide financially for someone to be able to be an advocate for those children. So how do you go about matching a child? I know, like, if you look at foster care adoption, you really want to make sure they're a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of go about, matching children with their advocate? What are some things that you would look for when you're kind of thinking of who you'd want the advocate to be for the specific child?
A lot of times in the very beginning, people don't know what they want, which age group of children they want to work with. And a lot of times we have to go out of necessity and out of need, because right now we have a backlog of children who are waiting for a CASA. Wow. And we cannot keep up. And that always blows my mind, thinking just, that's just Summit County. Yeah. And I think, what is happening in Cleveland or in larger cities like New York or LA or something like that? Like, I can't imagine what they're dealing with there, because we can't keep up in Summit County. So a lot of times it's out of necessity that you'll get your first case. But then after that, and after you work for a little bit and you find out, oh, I really like to work with teens, or I want to try to work with a baby, or things like that, then we try to match that from location, because some of our kids are placed quite a distance away. Some of them are local. Some you might get that are local, but then move. So you could get a case where you're like, oh, I live in Macedonia. Perhaps I'll take that one. And then that kid could move 3 or 4 times, unfortunately, after you get them. So you don't know. But we try to do by location, by what the volunteer expresses that they want to try to work with, what's worked for them in the past, and things like that.
And can I just back up for 1 second? In the state of Ohio, if a child's been found to be abused or neglected through juvenile court, and again, we're working through juvenile court, not necessarily a criminal court, the statute requires that a guardian ad litem be appointed to represent the child's best interest in court. And in many of the counties, the guardian ad litem is an attorney. There's only about half of about 44 out of the 88 counties use the volunteer CASA model. So you're right when you're talking about expenses. If other counties do not have CASA volunteers to use, then they have to pay attorneys to take those cases. So we are really lucky in Summit County because our program serves between 800 and 1,100 kids a year. Our volunteers typically only take 1 or 2 cases at a time, and a case is a family, so it could be 1 child or it could be 7 or 8. So it just really depends on the need. But we definitely, like Candy said, we have a backlog of kids that need a voice in court.
So what happens with the kids that, are kind of just sitting there waiting for an advocate? Obviously, you only have so many. Let's say you have 20 advocates and 50 kids. You can only place so many with them. What kind of happens to kids that are waiting? And then do the CASA volunteers, do they have interaction with the family and the kids as well as all the other people throughout this whole process?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Our advocates have, rules that they follow, codes that they need to follow, but you see your CASA child at the minimum of once a month. Okay. So they're always visiting with them. And a couple of different things. One is we also have staff GALs, okay, and so we're lucky in that regard. So their job is, in the grand scheme of things, sort of like a paid guardian ad litem for CASA. And so they can have between 25 to 28 kids on their caseload, and that's what they do there. So that's nice that we have those staff social worker to take cases as well. Some of the volunteer coordinators take cases, and then we will send the cases upstairs. And when I say that, that means that an attorney will be appointed for them if we can't fulfill it as a CASA. So they'll have representation.
I have a comment coming in from a Leanne Schaefer.
Yes.
Leanne says that not every court is blessed with a CASA program. Judge Linda Teodosio is a huge supporter of the program, and as a magistrate in Summit County Juvenile, she relies heavily on the investigations and the recommendations of the CASA assigned to the case.
And that is absolutely true.
Right.
The CASA program cannot exist without the judge's buy-in. And our judge truly values the volunteers. And she actually comes to every swearing-in ceremony and swears in each volunteer and actually calls them up and asks them what got them interested in the CASA program. So she is definitely, as our magistrates really appreciate the input of the volunteer. Sometimes people say, well, what kind of educational background do I need? What kind of life experience? And again, Judge Teodosio kind of describes it as you're the eyes and ears of the community. She really feels like there's enough professionals in the courtroom. She wants somebody out there who is just advocating on behalf of the child.
Okay, so explain like what happens. So typically, is there an estimated timeline of like how long the process can take? And then how do you kind of follow through after that whole court process is over when they've made that final decision? Do you ever kind of see the kids even have to come back?
Okay. Well, they try to get the case done within a year.
Okay.
So the parents get a case plan through Children's Services and they give them a year to make those changes to get that done. However, there can be 2 6-month extensions to that as well,
Okay.
as long as they're making progress. But then after your case is closed, so if they were reunified with their parents or they went legal custody to grandma, for example, our role is done. It's
Okay.
over after that point. You do see some kids come back into the system, unfortunately. That does happen. I had one of my first cases was a 6-year-old girl. She came back as a 22-year-old mom. So that was sad to see.
Wow.
That cycle coming back again. And then I had another case return as a 16-year-old who we also thought was maybe a human trafficking victim. So again, that was sad to see. So some kids do come back into the system after their case closes.
Okay. And then, so how does a child kind of move on from the program? Just basically through the court kind of ends everything and they figure out a solution and move forward from there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
They'll either be reunified with their parents or custody to a relative, or sometimes they'll go permanent custody, which is then they're available for adoption. Sort of like you guys were talking before about your podcast that you have the foster and adoption cases. So yeah, there's different outcomes that could happen.
And we always ask the volunteer to commit to the life of the case. We really stress that. So like Candy said, a case could actually last up to 2 years. But what we really try to instill in the volunteer is that the kids that we work with have had so many disappointments and people telling them that they're going to do something and they don't follow through. And so when we assign a volunteer to a case, we really want to be able to tell that child, this is your advocate, and they're going to be with you throughout this journey. They're going to be your voice in court. And so you really need to make that commitment and step up to the plate, because the last thing that this kiddo needs is another adult saying they're going to follow through with something and they don't. So it's a tremendous commitment, but it makes such a tremendous impact. But that impact isn't always immediate. So, if people are interested in a volunteer experience like Habitat for Humanity, you build a house and you can walk away and say, I built that house. Or if you volunteer at the food bank, you can say, I helped serve 100 families. This isn't tangible. You can't put your hands on it. But I can tell you, it definitely makes a difference for a child to know that this is somebody who's volunteering. They're not paid. They're just here for you because you're important. Yeah. And that really makes kids like, well, what do you mean they're volunteering? So it can really turn a child's life around.
Yeah, I went to a rehab training recently. I have a huge passion for human and sex trafficking, and that was one of the biggest things that they stressed upon in the training was that if you're going to be like a mentor to the children at the youth safe house, or if you're going to be a mentor even for some of the adults, but especially the children, if you say that you're going to show up on specific days, unless literally an emergency outside of your control happens, you need to be there.
Absolutely.
Because I remember growing up when my mom supposed to have visitation and she wouldn't show up, that's disappointing.
Right.
And then to now be in a place where, you have these people who say, I'm going to show up for you, I'm going to be there for you to support you. And then they don't show up and you're like, well, this is just what I'm going to deal with, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and that's why I feel like there's probably not a lot of volunteers, because they say that's a lot of commitment for me. So thankfully the people that are volunteering, they are making that commitment, but I can see why some people might say, I don't know if that's for me, because it's a lot to take on.
Right. It is a lot to take on. And I always try to remind my volunteers when they're having a moment like that,
Mhm.
because it can be really heavy,
Mhm.
that one is you're making a recommendation of what you think is best for that child. You investigated, you worked with this family, you make a recommendation to the court of what you think is best for them, but then the judge or the magistrate is making that decision. You're making a recommendation, but the final decision comes down to them.
Got another comment from Leanne. CASAs are volunteers, but in addition to having a volunteer coordinator, the CASA office also has attorneys who represent the CASA in hearings if it's a contested matter.
Correct. So we have staff attorneys on hand. So that serves as another support for the volunteers. Not only do they have the volunteer coordinator, but they have staff attorneys there who, again, will come into court and represent the CASA volunteer in court, because nobody likes to go to court.
Yeah.
And it can be pretty intimidating. And even though we tell our volunteers, you're not the one in trouble, it can be pretty scary to have to go into court and go on the stand and, again, speak in front of other people and have somebody else make a ruling on that.
Well, and I can imagine if you're standing up there and you have, let's say, two parents, mom and dad, and it's a matter of a custody situation of, mom wants custody, but so does dad. And you're saying, I don't think mom is fit to be having custody of these children, to stand up there and have that mother look at you. And you're like, she's pissed off at you.
Right.
She looks at you like you're the worst person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine it's not a matter of, like you said, oh, you're in trouble, but like the stress of having to explain to someone, like, you're just not fit at this moment for that. And like, it's nothing personal, but we have to do what's best for the child. So yeah, I mean, I can definitely see why, having other people there to be supportive is really important. So, and then I was just thinking too, I'm a very relational person. I love having relation and community with people. And so do you ever have volunteers who get a little bit attached to their family and their children? And what happens in that situation when the court case is over? Are they still allowed to write and to see and all those things?
Mm-hmm. It is 100% hard to do, that's for sure, because you've been with them through something that's so emotional and most likely the worst time of their lives, and so it's hard to give that up as a volunteer too, because you keep wanting keep your eye on them to make sure they're doing okay and that mom's staying clean, or whatever the issue may be, and you want to check in with them, but also they associate you with that time too. So it's nice to say that goodbye and have that, and then they know that they're going to be okay, and this was the decision that was made for them, and I think you still think about them though, for sure.
I would think it's impossible to not get attached, especially with the littles, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'd be a blubbering idiot all the time,
Yeah.
because you're invested in their story and you're invested in their life. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I don't want to make you emotional.
Yeah.
All right. But at the same time,
Right.
it's.
But there's so many other kids coming through the front door too. Do you know
Right.
what I mean, that it's like we did our job with you, and now my job is I need to go, and my job is to go visit with other kids.
Right.
Because it's a tricky situation in that you're not their buddy. This is not like a big brothers, big sister kind of
Right.
relationship.
Right.
You're their advocate, which means sometimes you have to advocate for what kids don't want. Some kids may want to go home to their mom or dad, and the volunteer might think that's not in their best interest. So, even though you develop a close relationship, you do have to kind of keep a line there and understanding what your role is. But certainly if a child would reach out to a volunteer after a case is closed, we would not tell that volunteer not to respond, if that kiddo was just taking, touching base with them. But it is hard to sever that, as it should be. If you've done your job, it should be hard to close that
Not
case.
it. God bless you.
Yeah. Well, and some of the parents are the same way too.
Oh, yeah.
Like the parents still want to continue to reach out to the CASA and show photos of how the kids are doing and stuff
that's
like that.
awesome.
So yeah, that is nice.
That's awesome.
And we've had many CASA volunteers attend an adoption finalization hearing. So once they are adopted, the CASA volunteer is there and is part of their story. So that's a great kind of way to wrap up a case sometimes.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about some of the other programs that are out of around Summit County that are maybe similar or not quite the same, but kind of have similar things that go on with that.
Well, we do work closely with Rahab. Our juvenile court, again, is kind of unique in that we, Judge Teodosio has established specialized court dockets, and one is the human trafficking docket. So she does identify kids who might be at risk of human trafficking or have been trafficked. So we work very closely with Rahab. We also have a specialized court docket for families struggling with substance abuse issues. So we have a good relationship with the ADM board or IDH or some of those community organizations as well. So we don't operate in a vacuum. And part of the role of the volunteer is to sort of be aware of what some of those resources are. And make sure that, again, the parents are getting the resources that they need in order for their children to be returned to them. I don't know if you can think of anybody else.
I was just thinking about how a lot of times, like, I know when I started, I had no idea of the support services that were out there. And I think what's nice about our training program is that it introduces all those kinds of things so that it does open your eyes to find out what's going on in your community. And you're like, oh, I didn't even know that organization existed. So that's a nice part too.
All right, I got a comment coming in from a viewer, and let me preface this. So Jennifer, she's a friend of the show, and I'm going to be having her on our show here beginning of June. She's part of the jobs program that they're starting in Kenmore, JOBS, and she was on our adoption and foster care show. So she's looking at it from the flip side as far as CASA. And it's not a negative comment, it's just a comment. So I'm just going to share it with you, okay? She said, if you're only visiting once a month, that helps you to not necessarily have to build a relationship, that you're kind of just a stranger that checks in on them, okay? So do you have a response to that, or what's your thought process on that?
Well, it's a minimum. You have to have a minimum contact of once a month. And I think in the beginning of cases, you're going far more frequently than that to build that relationship with that child. But after you've had a case for 6-7 months or something like that, you're doing all these peripheral contacts as well, checking in with teachers, counselors, and things like that. So it's not just you going to the foster home and seeing the child once a month. There's a lot of other work that you're doing at the same time so that you're up to date on your case. You're checking in with your parents, you're checking in with their counselors, with their parenting class instructor, with their attorney. So you're figuring out what they're doing as well. So you have a big picture. It's not just, hey, we need somebody to go check in on this kid once a month.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than that.
Yeah. I can definitely understand her comment though, where, you're looking and you're saying, how are you building relationship if you're only really visiting because you're doing all these other things with the child once a month? So I definitely can understand, Jennifer's comment. So I appreciate hearing that because I think it brings attention to that fact of,
keep going.
Oh, just that, yeah, you are you're there as a volunteer, you're not there as their friend, and you're there for the best interest of the child. And so you may be building a relationship, but you really you're doing a job essentially.
Right.
Go ahead.
And, we do have a population of kids who are in residential treatment centers. And the only people who come to visit them are their children's services worker or their CASA volunteers. So in those instances, I think that the volunteers spend a little bit more time, with that particular youth to create that relationship. Because like I said, sometimes those are the only two people that are coming to see that child once a month.
And to be fair, this whole topic now, I mean, 3 ago has kind of come full circle on all of this. In dealing with foster care and dealing with adoption and dealing with opiate crisis where kids are basically being abandoned, in dealing with unwanted pregnancies, et cetera, right? This is like a hurricane of hot button topics, okay? So for us to be now talking about CASA, which is a group of volunteers, okay? Here, I'll do this one.
Bless them there.
Bless them, okay?
Go ahead and bless them there.
Go ahead and bless them. They're volunteers, all right? So so are the foster care and adoption people too. Adoption people, obviously, they want to help to give that child a forever home, right? Where the foster care folks are also volunteers. So I could see all these layers and levels of emotion and this is great, this sucks. There's a lot of that banter back and forth. It's like you're in a teeter-totter of emotion. Because at the end of the day, we're all dealing with kids, right? Hello, kids. My children are white.
That was a good time back there.
It's just a bazinga. But I'm just, come on, go on by. At the end, they're all arriving. Does this mean the Fortnite games are over? Okay. So the point is, there's all these emotions of things that are all kind of intersecting, and then you add parents that may or may not be fit to parent, and then you add the court system, and it's like this goo of all these things that are all like intermingled, right? So I can understand where people would have emotion involved and respond emotionally and ask questions emotionally versus not, right? Because at the end of the day, again, I've got these four lovely cherubs of mine, and I try to, everything I do with them for the most part is emotional, but you try to parent non-emotionally at times. But I'm thinking I would be a wreck. I would be a wreck if I was in your guys' place, because you're dealing with all these situations all intermingled, and you're like, I have to represent and be an advocate, and I have to not get emotionally attached, because I know at the end of the day, this kid's not going to be a part of my life after X number of months, years, whatever. That has to be hard.
Right.
It has to be hard, right?
It is hard. I mean, we have a whole secondary trauma thing that we're trying to work with our volunteers on, in self-care, because that's 100% legitimate. Some of the kids, as a volunteer coordinator, I'll listen to my volunteers talk about their kids, so I know those kids, and I get emotional. So I don't know if it's that third set of trauma. I 100% understand that. Like, you're doing something that's so important and so powerful. How could you not have emotions over it? It's a person's life that you're talking about. So I 100% get that. And you might leave your visit and go in your car and cry, or lay in your bed awake at night wondering what you're going to do. But I think that we have such a good support in our program itself. I know my coworkers are fantastic. My boss is fantastic. So we can talk it out with each other. Our volunteers can't go home and talk to their spouse about it, because of confidentiality. So they really only have the CASA office to talk to. So we try to do whatever we can to make them feel like that's a home, a place where they can open up and they can be emotional, so that when they go to their visit or they go to their hearing, they can rein that in and they can be professional.
But on the other hand, too, there's great outcomes too. I mean, you get to see sometimes families overcome these challenges, and kids get to go home, and it works. Or you get to see kids who are adopted, and again, if this doesn't bother somebody, then we've got a problem, because this should never ever be acceptable. It should never ever be normal. And it's our responsibility as a community to step up to the plate and help these kids in our own backyard to understand what normalcy looks like, what a family is all about, and to also help the parents in getting their children back. Every parent has a right to parent their child if they're able to do so. And we certainly aren't in the business of removing children from parents, but we also know sometimes parents aren't in that place where they can care for their kids.
And I'm sure that, the CASA advocate might recommend something, and at the end of the day, the judge might completely, I don't want to say disregard their opinion, but the judge might see something that they don't and say, this is really what we need to do. And it's hard, because if you really feel like that situation is not good for that child, and the judge is saying, well, this is what I see and this is what really needs to happen, it's got to be hard to know that child might be going back to something that, from your perspective, again, it's always a perspective thing, that you don't see as the best option or the best fit. But at the end of the day, it's really what is best for them.
Right. And they have, I think it's also what's hard for volunteers is, we're not attorneys. Right. We're just everyday people. We went through the training. We love kids. We just want to help out. And so sometimes you get real mad at that court system, and you're like, what is that? Why do we have to do that? But that's the law, and that has to be followed. And there's certain things that need to be met by that. So that's something also, I think, that's enlightening as you enter into this program, of that whole other side of the law and how that side works too. good or bad, it's there.
Yeah. So what would you say the success rate is of doing the CASA program, having the kids actually get to, I mean, again, you said the ultimate goal is to have the families stay together, have the family heal, have the family go through the process of doing all the work that they need to do to be in a place where they can stay as a unit. So what would you say the success rate of that is? And then what things do you think could be improved with the program to help ensure that these kids do get to stay with their families? And sometimes I think it's just a family issue where, it's not anything the CASA advocate did or the court system did. It's really just the family itself. But in the cases where it is maybe something with the court, something with CASA, how is the success rate? And then what do you think can be improved to make sure that happens?
Well, I keep track of the stats. So I know that majority of the kids are reunified with their parent. I'd say it's pretty close. It's maybe 60% go to either their parents or to a relative. So there's a lot of grandma and grandpas out there, aunts and uncles that are raising their relatives. There's obviously definitely a certain amount of kids who get adopted, and I want to say off the top of my head, I want to say it's maybe about 14% of kids that happens to. So it is nice because the majority, even though that might be a small majority, well, no, it's not. The majority of kids are reunified with their parents.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we know that there's been research that the CASA model works. Studies show that if a CASA volunteer is involved, that families are reunited more quickly. But if a child needs to be adopted, then the adoption takes place more quickly. So the outcomes for kids, again, when we're talking about socialization or emotional growth, we do see that they do better when there is a CASA volunteer involved. We're actually the largest CASA program in the state of Ohio and the largest for in the country, given the state or given the size of Summit County. So again, we are really lucky that we have the program, or the community is lucky. But again, if to change anything, we need more people.
Right.
We really are in crunch time right now.
So how would you go about, because you said this is a very rare program. It's not really like all the court systems have this. Why do you think that court systems are not implementing something like this, whether it be a lack of knowledge on it or maybe they just don't think it's going to do well? Like, why do you think there aren't more of these, and how can we start maybe getting them into the court systems for places that don't have them? Because obviously you said it is successful, and I think it's something we need to start implementing in other places. And so how do we go about doing that?
Well, most people don't realize, but CASA is part of a national program. So the national CASA is outside of Seattle, Washington. And then in Ohio, we have what we call Ohio CASA, which is located in Columbus, and they help to kind of monitor the CASA programs throughout the state. So Ohio CASA is always trying to implement new CASA programs. Medina County does not have a CASA program. Portage County doesn't have one either. Cuyahoga County, I believe, is in their second year of having a CASA program, so they're still sort of working out some of the kinks there. And they were the last metro area to get a CASA program, but I think it's just afraid of change and what this might look like. Like, I think sometimes courts are afraid to start this route in case it doesn't work, and then they have to stop doing it. So I think just like with everything, it's just, that it's not broke, really. So let's not fix it, but it really is broke. So somebody needs to fix it. But I don't know if you have any other suggestions on it's getting the word out. It's like opportunities like this for us to say, hey, this is available, but it's not available for everybody. And what can you do in your community is talk to your elected officials and say, hey, I heard about CASA, and how do we get one of those programs in our community?
Yeah. So do you ladies have any closing thoughts on just CASA as a whole, or anything really just related to the conversation as a whole?
I would just say that if you're at all interested, or if you want to know more information, to contact us for sure, because it's a fantastic program. It's a wonderful program. And I think, like Beth said, if more people knew about it, they would do it. And like I started with, I've been there for 21 years. There's still so many people that I run into that don't have any idea what it is.
That's what we're doing today. That's what this is. That's what this is.
I don't know. It's going to be all over now, so we're going to be inundated.
Just
It's gonna
just
be
wait.
fantastic.
You're
Just
like,
wait.
too many volunteers.
Right, we're done here. We don't have any more.
That'd be a
We're
good
going to send
problem.
you to this place because they need more.
I'm not big yet. We aren't big yet, but we're on our way there, and we're gonna help you as much as we can.
And help
So-
the kids.
Yeah, and again, that's the at the end of the day, that's the whole point, right? It's to help the kids. So, ladies, thank you so much for being on today.
Yes, thank you.
God bless you. I like I told you, I'm an emotional basket case. Look at Kate over there. She's probably nodding her head right now. Okay, I couldn't do it. So God bless you guys for doing what you do. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this information. Again, if you're interested in being a part of this program, just reach out. How do they do that? Go ahead and tell them again.
www.summitcasagal.org.
Okay. Now, in a related theme, next week, 3 to go is, well, first of all, let's have a big round of applause. First of all, for Beth and Candy for being on, but secondly, for Lindy for hosting her first episode tonight. So, yay. I kind of like being this disembodied voice behind the camera. I'm like the producer from the other room, you know what I mean? So we might be doing this a little more often. We'll see. But next week, in related news, we're going right back at it in terms of a similar theme, and we're going to be at the Grace Race over in Copley on Memorial Day. Okay, and I've been DJing and helping out with the Grace Race since its inception with Grace Church. And it's a 5K Memorial Day event. And what they do is they help raise money for Feed My Starving Children. So literally, all the money that comes in through the Grace Race goes to then pay for the meal packs that then occur the week after. And was last year the million? Or was it 2 years ago?
Oh, I think it was.
2 years ago.
We just keep growing.
Well, it was it last year or the year before? I think it was the year before.
I think it was the year before. We wanted a $500,000.
We were going to do 500,000 meals, and Feed My Starving Children contacted Grace, and they said, so we've got a problem. We're short on our normal meal count for the year. Would you guys be willing to try to do 1 million? So we're like, okay. So we ended up doing 1 million and it was like 1.1 million meals. Because what happened was they were like, okay, well, they doubled our shifts, and they put us in charge of the music, and they're like, we need them to pack as fast as possible. And of course, we had them singing to Whitney Houston and all kinds. They're just woo to the point where the Saturday, the last day, they had to slow them down, or they're going to run out of stuff. So we played Titanic. We played the Titanic theme song, and it just didn't go over as well. But anyway,
so people were running the race, volunteering, paying to run the 5K, and then those people that are running the 5K who paid to run the 5K, so you're paying to run, which makes no sense. Okay, I'll run if there's like cake or wine or something.
Speaking of, could you take a bite? You haven't had a bite of your birthday cake. All right.
And then the people are the same people who are running in the heat, because it was very hot last year, are the ones packing the meals. I just think it's so
and they bring
cool.
all their friends, and they wear hair nets and the beard nets, and it's just awesome. It's a fun time. So, folks, look that up. Grace Race. If you haven't registered to do so yet, please do so. That's still open to register. And again, you can register to help with those meal packs as well. You do not have to run to be a part of the meal packs. All right. So as we turn to Memorial Day, I'm going to use a term that I don't like. People always say Happy Memorial Day, and I'm going to say not Happy Memorial Day. What I'm going to say is Memorial Day is a time where we stop and we remember, okay? So to all those that have been lost, and to all those that you have lost, and to all those that you want to remember, we just say that you have a safe Memorial Day, all right? So not necessarily Happy Memorial Day, but enjoy your Memorial Day with your family, friends. Remember those who you have lost, okay? But until then, and I think they know the drill because you've seen the show. Until then, I don't know where I'm going, but there ain't no sense in being late. Everybody on set, say goodnight, Shirley.
Good night, Shirley.
This podcast is a copyright of Moon Garden Media Limited.
Oh, just a lot of peanut butter.